Hello guys, F.A.D here and welcome back to yet another video on the channel. Today, we're going to be doing something that I've had planned for quite a while now. However, at the same time, it's something that I've really dreaded. Today, I'm going to be covering my top 10 albums. Yes, it was only a matter of time before I had to make a video like this. I mean, especially ever since my channel became primarily music oriented. And today is the day we finally stopped delaying it. Putting together a top 10 was not easy to say the least. I mean, music is a huge part of my life, and having to limit it to just 10 records was a near impossible task. However, I have managed to come up with a top 10, one that I am reasonably happy with, at least as of today. You see, I'm a pretty indecisive person, and my opinions have a tendency of shifting quite a lot, so don't look too deep into the ranking here. My main motivation behind this video is actually more so to let you guys know a bit more about my music taste and how it was shaped and just generally what I listen to on the day-to-day. Also, my music taste is questionable at best, and anyone who watches my channel knows that. So, if you're going into this video expecting to see classics and universally acclaimed works, then this is not the video for you. This list is going to focus on, of course, quality, but besides that, also things like personal attachment and nostalgia, things like that. Like Jigsaw would say, the rules are simple. I'm limiting myself to only one album per artist. Otherwise, this list would probably be only feature a select few bands. Let's see, another thing real quick before we start. A couple of honorable mentions are Egypt Central's self-titled album, Mudvayne's Lost and Found, Shinedown's The Sound of Madness, Taproot's Blue Sky Research, Stain's Break the Cycle, and Opeth's Ghost Reveries. Yes. But now, without any more further ado, let's get into the list. Twisted Sister are a band that I started listening to as a kid at a time when I didn't even distinguish rock music from any other music. Back then it was all just music for me. Of course, at the time I mainly listened to the two big singles, I Wanna Rock and We're Not Gonna Take It. And though I may not have noticed it at the time, these really were the first steps, the first signs, if you will, of me really developing my music taste and really finding myself musically. There was just something about the energy, the attitude that made me gravitate towards it. And you know, as time went on and music started becoming a more important part of my life, I went back to this record and I still keep coming back to it to this day. And every time I do, I'm just filled up with these happy feelings inside of me. This little collection of songs, though not necessarily groundbreaking or technically riveting, they just allow me to turn off my mind and step into the world of my younger self, and I feel that that sensation alone warrants its place on this list. Besides the two singles I already mentioned, there are also a bunch of other lesser-known tracks that I also hold very close to heart here. Firstly, the other single, you know, not as big as We're Not Gonna Take It or I Wanna Rock, the emotional ballad The Price, which is a simply beautiful song. I actually remember listening to it a couple of years ago now, and my dad actually coming up to me and saying, you know, these guys are actually quite alright. And in context, this has always meant a lot to me because, you know, my dad over the years has really not been a fan of the music that I've liked. So, yeah, I mean, furthermore, the title track, Stay Hungry, is about as good of a opener as you could wish for, never fails to fill me up with energy. And also the track 7, Don't Let Me Down, has always been a personal favorite of mine. Lastly, I can't leave this album without at least mentioning the interesting to say the least two-parter Horrorturia. Now, what this is essentially two songs connected together with a story about a murderer named Captain Howdy, who's also the title of the first part, in which we are taken on this freakish musical journey through his murderous crimes, and it really makes you feel like you're in some sort of 80s slasher flick. Before then, the second part, simply titled Street Justice, leads us into the aftermath, where the local people gang up together to punish the killer for his deeds. And yeah, just all of these things together here on this album, they all add up together to form a package that I will simply forever cherish. This is where I want to reiterate that I am in no way a professional music critic. Anyone who watches my videos will know that I often just simply struggle to really put certain things into words when talking about music, and that's basically the case here, so bear with me. I just love it when an album has a vibe, when an album just pulls me in and puts me in a specific mindset. And I really feel that Make Yourself is a prime example of that. It's really difficult for me to explain, but just every time I listen to this album, no matter what time of day, no matter what mood I'm in, I just get put into this specific state, and it's almost hypnotizing, quite magical, and frankly, one of those beautiful things about music and the power that it has over us. And for that alone, I think it earns its place on my list. But of course, the material here itself is wonderful as well. Now, I'm not even really a big Incubus fan, to tell you the truth. I've never really looked too deep into their discography post Morning View. But yet I've always had this special appreciation for Make Yourself. Just from the very first time that I listened to Drive and then couldn't stop listening to it on repeat all day, till today and beyond. There's just something about this record, and I just can't ever bring myself to ever listen to a single song here and then put it down. No, I need to live through this whole journey. All these elements here, the band's experimentation, the fusion of various sounds, it all adds up together to create an album like no other, in my opinion. It's like an adventure. And if only I had come across it earlier in my musical journey, then, it would have had some extra nostalgia points, and then it only would have placed even higher on this list.
Have you forgotten everything that I wanted? Do you forget it and now you never got it?
Oh, Avril Lavigne. Moving past the fact that she was, still is, and probably always will be my ultimate celebrity crush, I've always had a soft spot for her music as well. They say that our love for certain music is often shaped by the memories that we have with it, and perhaps that's a bit of an unfair advantage here once again, because I just can't help but think back to the times, every time I listen to this record, when I was just sitting in the back of my parents' car on holiday, listening to this record on my Discman, just looking out the window on a cloudy day. It's like I'm right back there again, honestly. But of course, this album itself is just exceptional in so many ways. I mean, it takes the best elements of Avril's debut and doubles down on them, perfecting all the details, and what we are left with is just an amazing end result. Sometimes overlooked in favor of its predecessor, Under My Skin is what I always found to be my favorite Avril album. It just has so many of my favorite cuts from her, the big one. My Happy Ending, which might just be my favorite Avril song. The opener, Take Me Away. What else is there? Don't Tell Me, Nobody's Home. The simple yet emotional Fall to Pieces. The massively underrated and intense Forgotten, and more. Just so much of the stuff here fits in so well with not only my favorite elements of Avril's music, but just the music that I love in general. And from the very first time that I stumbled across this record, I've always thought of it as just an excellent release, cover to cover. Musically and lyrically, this album shines. I mean, it's filled with so many emotional moments that all come over so genuine. It really does feel like a personal record, but also one that I feel many listeners can, relate to, whether it's a song about a relationship or losing someone. This is like one of those albums that you can really use as a sort of a crutch in tougher times. It is a bit of a shame that Avril Lavigne would never put out another album quite like this, but I suppose that's what happens with artists, they grow, they change, all that. But I will always be able to look back at this particular record and just, see it as not only a time capsule of fond memories, but just simply great music.
Well, no, I don't fight pity on false feelings, not fooled by your misleadings, won't buy this line, you're
Yep, we weren't ever really gonna go around it. Nickelback just had to be on this list somewhere, and I am more than prepared to get my backlash for it. Yes, I like Nickelback, but at the same time, I wholeheartedly understand all of the criticism that they get. I'm not going to sit here and defend Nickelback. Honestly, in most cases, there ain't much to defend. However, that does not change the fact that these guys have a special place in my heart, and they will continue to have it for the long run. This band played a massive role in me discovering my passion for music, and honestly, the fact that their music is so accessible and easy to process had a lot to do with that. This was the first band I started buying CDs for, the first band I went out of my way to buy merch for. I know their albums like the back of my pocket, I can name every single deeper cut, and I've sung along to every single track a billion times over. So yeah, no surprise that these guys have found their way onto my top 10 albums list. In the end, I went for 2003's The Long Road, an album which always stood out for me. I've always found it to be my favorite Nickelback record, and something that can actually be confirmed by my old reviews of the band's discography from years ago. I just feel that this record really has that perfect balance, still maintaining some of that early Nickelback edge and grit, while subtly incorporating those more modern mainstream elements, like on the track, Figured You Out, which infamously begins with the line, I like your pants around your feet. However, if you do listen to the whole song, you will find that there's actually a little bit more to it than just that. Not that I am calling it a misunderstood work of art or anything like that. Someday was the big single here, and it's definitely one of my all-time favorite Nickelback songs, but The Long Road also has a bunch of awesome underrated deeper cuts, like, the opener, the rapid and ferocious, Flat on the Floor, Do This Anymore, which is a personal favorite of mine, so underrated, the heavy and dark Because of You, and Throw Yourself Away, the mega catchy Another Hole in the Head, and then the feel-good album closer, See You at the Show, which incorporates some country elements. You of course can't talk about a Nickelback album without mentioning the amazing, crisp, top-tier production. Say whatever you want about Nickelback, their albums always have the cleanest production. It's become a staple of their sound, which of course has also led to critics calling them overproduced. But in my opinion, that's a matter of personal taste. Chad's vocals are still in their prime here, Nickelback's trademark catchy riffs are in full effect. Honestly, this album is just such a strong all-rounder, it's not super complicated, but in my opinion, it holds up amazingly, and not just as a Nickelback record. I'd frankly recommend it to anyone who hasn't checked it out yet. Even though I'm not as Nickelback crazy as I used to be, that doesn't change the fact that this album honestly takes me back to what I would call a simpler time, one that I have a lot of nostalgia for. And that alone is special, of course, next to the fact that I honestly also do just still absolutely love this album. Oh lord, I can already sense the reaction to this, so just please let me explain myself first. Now, of course, the odd thing here is not putting Slipknot on a top 10 list like this. No, I mean, Slipknot are one of the most universally loved acts in rock, bar some loser elitists that still have their panties in a twist. No, the odd thing here is, of course, me choosing to include the one specific record which, over the years, has widely been labeled as the group's weakest effort. Check out any list or ranking online, you'll honestly have a pretty hard time trying to find any publication which does not single out All Hope Is Gone as Slipknot's worst outing. And there are many reasons for that, many arguments against this record which honestly are all more than fair. Was the recording process very tense and clouded by growing rifts within the group? Well, yes. Is it less heavy all across the board, with many songs shying quite far away from Slipknot's sound and sometimes even switching it for that of Corey Taylor's second project, Stone Sour? Again, yes. So why again is this album not only somehow my favorite Slipknot release, but also worthy enough of making its way onto my top 10 albums list? Well, I'll try to make my case. While I am in no way ignorant of this album's flaws or all the valid criticism against it, I've always picked All Hope Is Gone to be my personal favorite Slipknot record. Now, it might perhaps not be a perfect Slipknot album, but man, is it just an amazing album, in my opinion. Looking back, it was a huge success commercially, with this being the first Slipknot album to debut at #1 on Billboard, alongside tracks like Psychosocial going on to become fan favorites, so the issues here definitely laid a bit deeper. The experimental moments like Gehenna weren't everyone's cup of tea, which is more than fair, especially since it is far removed from the sound of the self-titled album or Iowa. But I've always found myself on the opposite end of the spectrum here, with me really appreciating the eerie atmosphere that was brought with it. Furthermore, Vendetta was quickly labeled as a Stone Sour song, which somehow made its way onto a Slipknot album. But for me, as a fan of both acts, I always felt that its inclusion only helped the album feel more diverse. And these are just two examples of my personal perspective differing from that of most fans. The intro sets up the opening track so perfectly. Gematria, the killing name. Probably the most underrated Slipknot song, period. It frankly is a metal masterpiece. Or should I say, disasterpiece, am I right? It's never been played live, probably because of how crazy technical it is. But like everything from the drum work to the guitars to Corey's vocals comes together so well. It's this metal roller coaster that pulls zero punches, and honestly, I think I put it above Sick in my ranking of Slipknot openers. It's that good. On another note, Snuff might just be my all-time favorite ballad. It's definitely the most heart-wrenching. It is an outstanding showcase of amazing musicianship and Corey Taylor's magnificent songwriting. Additionally, this record just has a lot of personal value for me. I mean, this was the Slipknot era that got me into the band. So everything here for me just hits different. Tracks like Psychosocial, Sulfur, and Dead Memories were the first Slipknot songs I ever listened to. Still remember coming across them and in a way being terrified, but at the same time so intrigued. It all looked so scary, but like a car crash, I just couldn't look away. And slowly but surely, I just let the music take control of me, and before I knew it, I was a maggot. I just have so many fond memories of this album and era, like The Masks, which again are my personal favorites from the band. Corey's All Hope Is Gone mask will forever be the first image I get in my head whenever I think of Slipknot. I also have these fun memories of buying this CD on a school trip to England where I was listening to the album on my Discman, and I was super scared of my parents finding it back home, the cover with the pentagram and all. And speaking of the cover, it's amazing in its own right. I really love how it just fits the album's sinister vibe so well, and it's again one of those images that always pop into my head immediately when I think of the band. So yeah, perhaps it's all a bit biased, but All Hope Is Gone will always be a gem for me, no matter what the public general opinion of it will be. It was my introduction to one of my all-time favorite bands, but also my introduction to a deeper layer of heavier music, another vital step of my musical journey. I still remember when I was first getting into Metallica, and believe it or not, the first Metallica record I ever listened to was Saint Anger, yes. Now, as you can see, Saint Anger is not in my top 10. However, I will say that I really do like that record, and I will defend it until my grave. But that's not the focus here. After listening to Saint Anger and taking note of the general fan opinion of that album, I decided to go back, deeper into the band's discography, and that's where I found the Black Album, which at the time I saw that it wasn't necessarily considered by everyone to be their best work, but it definitely was their biggest release. So I decided to make that my next stop. And oh god, I have not looked back since. Now, this is an album which often splits the rock community a bit in terms of opinion, with many calling this the first step of Metallica selling out before fully embracing that notion on Load and Reload. However, I am in fact not an elitist, thank God, and I just simply love this album. Is it super heavy? No. Is it mega thrashy like Metallica's Roots? Not exactly. But what we do have here is a legendary metal album, one with so much historical value for the genre, but also an album which really played a massive role in further shaping my own personal music taste. It's just such a timeless record, and even though I may not listen to it every day like I used to, every time that I do decide to revisit it, I have an absolute blast. Enter Sandman is a classic by every definition of the word. I mean, everyone and their mother knows that opening riff, and if not for the fact that it's been massively overplayed, people would still be all over it. The original Unforgiven, while not my personal favorite of the trilogy, that title going to the second one, is still a beautiful, emotional, hard-hitting ride. And of course we all know about Nothing Else Matters, the song which everyone on planet Earth has already heard a billion times, and also one of the most famous beginner guitar songs. But let's not forget about some of the other songs here that sometimes get overshadowed by their bigger brethren. Holier Than Thou, Wherever I May Roam, Don't Tread on Me, Through the Never, the emotional, amazing The God That Failed, the super personal song that James Hetfield wrote about his religious mother that refused to get cancer treatment because of her faith, which then led to her passing. Now, all of this doesn't even begin to fully cover it, but what can I say that hasn't already been said over a billion times now, with this record turning 30 this year? It's just simply a masterpiece. Okay, so it goes without saying that this is a pretty controversial inclusion. If you follow my channel, you know where I'm coming from, as I have actually already made a whole video on Lost Prophets earlier this year, in which I go into great detail regarding what I think about the whole topic. So I won't get into it too much here, but just know that this is very much a case of me separating the art from the artist. In no way, shape or form do I defend or support what the singer of this band did, okay? Now with that being said, I just can't help but absolutely adore this album. Start Something simply has it all. There is not a single dull moment to be found here. Front to back, every single song here is just memorable in its own way. All the elements fit together so perfectly, the tracks flow seamlessly, partially thanks to the wonderful use of interludes, which manage to connect the whole album in such a way that it really ends up feeling like a proper journey, with flawless pacing. All the way from the energetic opener, We Still Kill the Old Way, to the spacey finale, Sway, this album just never loses its momentum, and it manages to tick so many boxes. You've got your softer, emotional moments, like the uplifting anthem, Last Train Home, or a personal favorite of mine, Hello Again. But then you've got the tracks that really pick up the pace, like Ride, Burn Burn, We Are Godzilla, You Are Japan. I'm also a huge fan of the lyrics and messages found on this record, with the overarching theme of taking control of your life and chasing your dreams. Like the title track says, stop dreaming, start something. It's super effective, and honestly I can listen to this album no matter the mood, no matter the day, it never fails to blow me away. It's just the perfect blend of edge, rebellion, inspiration, and talent, all the while highlighting the excellent musicianship present within the group all throughout. Again, if you guys want a more in-depth look into my opinions on this album and Lost Prophets in general, then check out the video I made on them. It's on my channel, and I'm actually really happy with how it turned out, and I've also been blown away by the reception that it's gotten thus far. It honestly might be my favorite video I've ever made, but for the sake of not repeating myself too much, let's move on into the top 3. Now, I don't care if you think Christian rock is uncool or whatever. Red is simply one of my all-time favorite bands, and one that still is putting out amazing music today, with their last album, Declaration, actually being one of my favorite releases of the past few years. However, when it came down to choosing my favorite Red album, it did come down to some of their earlier releases, notably this record and Until We Have Faces. Now, call it nostalgia or whatever, but these are the two discs that I have been coming back to the most over the years. But in the end, I went with their 2006 debut, End of Silence. This really was the perfect introduction for Red, beginning their partnership with producer Rob Graves and really laying out the blueprints for the formula that they would continue to master and thrive with for all the years to come. It's just, that blend of heavy guitars accompanied by various symphonic elements, and then, Michael Barnes' beautiful vocals, the cherry on the cake. It all together just helps craft a cinematic experience that only Red can pull off, and one that they have been pulling off for about 15 years now. You can argue that with further albums, Red polished up their sound and matured, but, while that may be true, I don't think that they ever managed to fully recreate the raw passion and energy found on their debut. In my opinion, in terms of atmosphere, End of Silence really manages to pull in the listener with a tighter grip than any of their other albums, though that's more so just a testament to how high they've set the bar for themselves. Whether you are Christian or not, there's just so much to find and enjoy here, as the material can still be interpreted in whatever way is right for you. That's the beautiful thing about music. We all have our own personal connection to what we listen to, and that's very much the case here. So, look past that Christian tagline and strap yourself in for an atmospheric roller coaster that will take you through the calmest breezes and the wildest storms, all the while visiting the darkest recesses of the human mind. A truly haunting yet beautiful experience, and easily one of my all-time favorite albums.
I must hold on to this. I've been told the time I still find my place.
If I were to sit here and try to explain exactly how much Cold's music means to me, I would be here all day trying to find the right words. This is a band that has been there for me a countless amount of times in my worst moments, and having to pick just one favorite album from their discography was absolute torture. In the end, it came down to this album and its two predecessors, 13 Ways to Bleed on Stage and Year of the Spider. And as hard as it was, like picking a favorite child, not that I would know what that feels like, I decided to go with a different kind of pain. And while I also might think that perhaps Year of the Spider is a more complete, all-around Cold album, a different kind of pain manages to consistently pull at my heartstrings like no other record. This album continued to take the band's sound in a more melodic direction, resulting in a mellower yet very emotionally driven record. Now, Cold as a band have always tackled emotional topics, being a perfect example of a band that you can turn to on a rainy day. However, with this album being surrounded by numerous negative factors, such as the band's problematic split with their old record label, rising tensions within the group, and frontman Scooter Ward dealing with many demons in his personal life at the time, the band just really was able to craft something which, on one hand, is so pure and heartbreaking, but on the other, it manages to be so beautiful. And it's just the way that Ward is able to take all that built-up pain and turn it into art. That's one of the main reasons why I have always loved Cold so much. Scooter Ward is one of my favorite people in music. He's an amazing vocalist, but his biggest attribute for me has always been his songwriting. He just has this way of making everything he writes feel so genuine and really tug at your heart. He's the main driving force behind Cold and the primary reason why their music has been so effective. As whenever everything else feels hopeless, Cold have been a band, a grade A example of a group that, can really embrace me with their music and genuinely make me feel like everything's gonna be okay. And on this particular album, they take that sensation and up it by like 5 notches, despite it being such a personal record. Because in a way, pain is universal. But for me, what sets this album even further apart from any other sad and angsty 2000s rock album is this general sense of positivity found all throughout the record. It isn't about embracing the hurt and giving into it. No, it has a recurring theme of overcoming it and moving on. And honestly, I am not ashamed to admit that this very album has helped pull me away from some pretty dark corners before on numerous occasions. Looking at the track list, the album starts off with the heavier Back Home, which is a faultless opener, but it's on the later, more mellow tracks where Scooter Ward makes himself a bit more vulnerable that this album truly shines. You know, it's the moments like the title track, the lead single, Happens All the Time, Another Pill, When Heaven's Not Far Away, When Angels Fly Away. I could go on and on. If my love for this band and album hasn't been made clear enough yet, then perhaps the fact that I've got Cold's spider logo tattooed on my arm could help reaffirm it. Again, I could never do this music justice with just my words. Just know that this album truly means a lot to me. But yeah, now, moving on, all of that aside, it's time for the main event. It's time for what you've all been waiting for, my number one album. And well, you've certainly been waiting long enough, so let's just get into it. My number one album of all time. As difficult as it was to put this list together, in the back of my mind I always sorta knew that this would be my number one. In a way, it's not really fair. This record has flaws that albums below it on this list do not have, and it all comes down to the one main recurring theme of this very list, and that's the sentimental value. Now you see, no matter how much time goes by, no matter how much new music I discover or how many new albums I listen to, I know for a fact that nothing will ever replicate the connection for me. But first, let's start with just Papa Roach, a group that means so much to me, one that I started listening to when I was like 7 or 8 years old. I still remember being online and stumbling across this one particular video about Jason Voorhees, and the song in the background, believe it or not, was Papa Roach. And what then started as a love for that one specific song slowly but surely turned into me discovering more and more of their material, and by now they are probably my all-time favorite band. I've seen them live back in 2017, and honestly I'd say that to this day that's still the best concert I've ever been to, and of course I was going to see them again in 2020 with meet and greet tickets until the COVID pandemic decided to shatter those dreams mere days before the event. But less said about that, the better. For now, let's focus on the connection. My favorite album, and it comes from my favorite band. Why do I classify this specific record heads and shoulders above the rest? Well, it's actually quite simple. You see, this album changed the way that I looked at albums. It really set my standards for what I thought an album should be at a time when I was really finding my footing with the music that I was listening to. There was a time, believe it or not, when I went into records expecting there to be some filler. That was just normal to me, expected. Like, I just couldn't be blown away by every single cut on a record. It's just second nature. It was pure logic. But then I stumbled across the connection, and it was just song by song. I was hooked by all of them, all of the deeper cuts, you know, Silence is the Enemy, Wish You Never Met Me, Give Me Back My Life, Breathe You In, Walking Dead, Won't Let Up, which has been one of my favorite songs, like, just of all time ever since I first heard it. Like, I've quoted it more times than I can care to count, and it's picked me up so many times. You know, that main line, keep your head up, because the world won't let up, has resonated with me until today, and it's been like basically my main inspirational / motivational song for years now. Similarly to the situation with Slipknot's All Hope Is Gone, this also happens to be the era of Papa Roach that I really started getting into the band. So I have many memories of these songs here actually being the group's, newest material. I also remember, looking at Jacoby Shaddix with his, at the time, new blonde look, thinking, wow, this is different, and of course he's kept that ever since. So yeah, it's got those extra nostalgia points for me. However, besides that, Papa Roach also just simply decided to try out some new things on the connection. After a somewhat underwhelming 2009 effort, Metamorphosis, they not only decided to sort of go back to the roots a bit and incorporate some rapping, but they also started making use of some electronic elements. And now these are both things that the band has continued to use since. So in many ways, this record is essentially the starting point of the band's current era that we're still in today. An era which has been trademarked by their music being a bit more diverse and being a bit more experimental. instead of, you know, just straight up strictly rock, as was the case with some of the efforts before the connection. But yeah, this album was just such a complete package for me. Like nothing else I had come across at the time. It just, from start to finish, it aligned so perfectly with the music that I wanted to hear, and till today it's still a go-to for me. Like, I can still put on The Connection and have an absolute blast cover to cover. Even the bonus tracks, which feature on the deluxe edition, which I happen to own, are both catchy and underrated as all hell. This record is like a bookmark in my musical journey. It was a point where I could definitively say that yes, this is the music that I love and have continued to love. I can point at this very album and say that yes, this captures the main essence of my taste in music, and it's also basically the point from which my music taste has continued to develop from over the years. I can even forgive this album's one major fault, that being its production, which is pretty rough around the edges. I mean, it becomes very apparent when you listen to it on any decent sound system, just a lot of hissing and the like, just, you know, those kinds of imperfections. But I suppose it's just a testament to my love for this record that this isn't enough to even bring it down from number 1 for me. In the end, you can't simply define good music. Sure, something can be more complex or feature more layers, but sound, it's so subjective. One piece of music can be heard by thousands of different people, and in the end, you'll be left with thousands of different opinions, emotions, and interpretations. And that's the beauty of it. There's no good, there's no bad. Nothing can so simply define what you feel when you're listening to an album, artist, or song. At the end of the day, that's all there is. The effect it leaves on you, the effect it leaves on me, the effect it leaves on all of us individually. And that goes deeper than anything else. And I guess that's how I want to close out this video. So yeah, my name is F.A.D. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'm gonna see you guys in my next video. Bye.